All right, greetings and good morning. Welcome back once again. Boker Tov. This is Amuna Yisrael, Solonomics 101. I am full at this moment, y'all. And I wanted to do this very quickly. Well, I don't know how quick it's going to be, but um, I want to start by saying all praises to the Creator for another day. Every opportunity that we have to live this life to the fullest, we should take advantage of the ability to live this life. I've over the past few weeks, I've been, my attentions have been on other things that are happening in the community, but this particular situation hit me hard, and I don't know why. And this is the name of the channel is Solonomics, right? So, as a person who practices what they preach, and make very much strides to do that, I kind of tried to take some time to try to figure out what exactly I was feeling and why. I want to start off by saying many condolences to the family and friends and all those who are mourning in general, mourning, period. There are many losses that are happening throughout the earth. And for those who are in this mourning period, when my thoughts and prayers go out to you, specifically those who are mourning across the globe, as I am seeing right now, for the, as many are saying, the slain rapper Nipsey Hussle, his children now, his significant other, his mother, his father, his grandparents, all the people that people tend to sometimes forget are actually actively mourning. I haven't said, except for the other video I did a few days ago, because like I said, it was on my mind. So I'm going to try to bring a Solonomics approach to this discussion because the internet is ablaze. Like, I just want to say that people are mourning. Those who knew him, those who didn't know him, those who interfaced, those who, in whatever capacity, feel some type of way. The only, in truth, the only awareness that I had, and now this is something that I'm just like researching because after it gets my attention, that's what I'm gonna do. But the only awareness that I really had, because I don't listen to rap, like full disclosure, in 2019, you know what I mean? I don't listen to rap. It's been umpteen years, and so my exposure was on the entrepreneurial side, in truth. And so I've seen a few interviews, probably one or two, about Los Angeles rapper in giving back to the community. And anytime we hear a story such as that, it's an endearing story. It's one that says the person beat the odds and now they have been able to come and give back to the community. I really want to go into, I might chop up this discussion in different parts so that I can stay on point about what this conversation is around beating the odds, and how that has an extension of the experience here in the diaspora, and how now this has become a badge of honor, and the way in which our worldview and the way in which we're looking at what's happening, and normalized to a certain degree, as some would say, this internalized oppression. I also at another time want to speak about, as I'm listening to a plethora of information come out. This is why sometimes it's good to be still and hear what's happening and what's being said. The perpetrator has been, uh, the person who they're alleging to have done it, maybe many people are saying is not a legend because they were there and they saw it. But then this person's aspirations and why one of, or what one of Nipsey Russell's business associates who was there said about the encounter, and what my thoughts on that are. But I'm not going to talk about that right now. I'm going to talk about the mourning process. Um, I find myself just looking at and listening back to what many people are saying who knew him, who didn't know him, the outpouring of love, and really just feeling that. You know what I'm saying? Feeling and making you want to know, again, like I said, more about what this person was about and how and why they impacted as many people as they did. I just also want to say that there were other people, two other people injured with him, but we don't really hear about those people. So I kind of want to look at celebrities and everyday people, and whether we as a society value celebrity, or basically the people who society celebrates more than even the people who are there every day, making this what we are celebrating go round. There are all these different working parts, even in his story, that he took time to, when you listen back, to give credit to where credit is due, of all these other working parts, meaning other peoples who are collectively putting forth their efforts to make something happen. But the world tends to want to celebrate only, one amongst the many, and then value that one amongst the many more than the cooperative, if you can understand what I'm saying. So for those, I don't even know the status of the other two who were shot. I know one refused treatment, and the other one, the last I heard, was in the hospital. And so to their families, you have to extend prayers and condolences. Just looking at some of the reactions on the internet, I almost did not want to put his name in this title. And I went back and forth with myself many times, because what I'm seeing in this internet age is this lack of respect for the process. Like, we have become so disconnected from the process of mourning, and so disconnected from a level of humanity, that some things that are being done and being said just moments or hours or days after someone has lost their life was taken, let me say, which happens a lot. It's like surprising to me. And I'm like, wow. Like, there's no chill. There's no chill, right? There's no chill. Like, there has to be a level of respect, and I guess a respect for life, to then value the loss of life. And I think soulonomics wise, this is dealing with the soul. We have to reflect on why it hurts when life is lost, right? And I'm gonna go into the metaphysical, spiritual realm for a minute. I'm seeing people on the internet, even though I don't stop to watch this type of stuff, searching so much for answers that they would look to cross spiritual lines and boundaries in order to sensationalize uh, death. Like, they're doing readings and things of this nature on. Okay, let me just stop. Okay, this is unscripted. Okay, I have the parts that I want to talk about, stages of grief. I want to talk about many things, so I'm just trying to steady my thoughts. So rewind. I'm just going to talk about the mourning right now. When a soul is forcibly ejected from the body, right? That is trauma. I talk often about trauma while the person is living. But there is a way in which a soul, like someone goes to sleep and they exit the body. That's the soul detaching from the body. So, and then there's a way where the soul is forcibly ejected from the body, which is through trauma. When you listen, or when you read, or when you study about near-death experiences, that is a forcible ejection, but the covenant or the agreement that the soul and the body has is not totally severed. Okay? But when it's totally severed, when the heart is no longer breathing, or the lungs are no longer breathing and the heart is no longer pumping, and it's totally severed, that ejection still traumatizes the soul, because the soul is where you feel. The soul is where the memories are stored. You see what I'm saying? Okay, so you have, in those who are mourning, when you continue, so that soul, usually when a soul passes in that way, or is disconnected, because that's what death is in this realm, it's the disconnection from the vessel, right? But the soul is still there. You see the outpouring where that soul, in particular, we're talking about Nipsey Hussle. Okay, I don't want to mispronounce his given name, and I want to talk about his given name in a minute. But Hermes, okay, I want to talk about that in a minute, but I want to talk about, I'm going to keep on this train of thought. Where all of this outpouring is going, and let me know if you guys are here, text, do what you need to do in the chat box. But that particular soul outpoured and poured a lot of his energy, his life force, which is in this plaza. I find it's just wild, that this is where the soul lost life, in this very same plaza, in the very same spot that had so many memories, that had so many inspirations, that had so many doubts, all of these things, that it's like a full, complete circle. However, it was tragic in the way that it happened. So the outpouring of love is in this very same place that it happened. A lot of times, other cultures understand that the soul kind of, for a certain period of time, whatever they are attached to or whomever they're attached to, they will still be in and around these spaces. Because there's a transition once you disconnect from the physical. So sometimes the way this culture treats this separation, even though people say that they're pouring out love for this soul, it goes against, to a certain degree, the process, because we are unaware. A lot of times we're ignorant of the process. But the people who are left behind are grieving. And so what we are experiencing in some spaces is the different ways in which people grieve loss. So I'm going to talk about a little bit now about the different ways in which people grieve loss. So what I've said, for those who just joined us, my estimation, study, and experience is that the soul stays around for a period of time. And I'll talk about that as well, Pascal. I'll talk about that because, yeah, I agree. What it is that we have been desensitized from the process of death because of the amount of traumatic departures and the expectation that if one defies this short period of time that even the melanated male has to live, then that's to be celebrated. But this has now become the norm. Young men, melanated men dying early has become the norm. And so many people are expressing shock and denial. Shock in the sense of, because it was so tragic and it was unexpected in this context, it's like you hear stuff like, I can't believe this happened. Why did this happen? You hear questions like this. Denial is what we are experiencing with the plethora of conspiracy theories that are coming up. And denial is a way to not deal with the fact that this soul has departed. And so one, as a safety mechanism in the mind, as another point to concentrate on the wall, instead of processing the emotions and the feelings of this loss, instead of allowing yourself to feel the loss, you will rather take your attention and say it's a conspiracy. You see what I'm saying? So that like I'm saying, it gives you another point of focus so that you don't have to deal with what's before you. Okay, so we see a lot of shock, people expressing themselves on the internet, and you see a lot of denial, people making conspiracy theories so that they don't process these emotions. Like, since I heard it, I'll say for myself personally, like I said, I didn't know the person, I didn't listen to the person's music, but I heard about the person's exploits and endeavors. And in passing, you hear about a lot of things. So you say, that's a good, it appears that you're doing a good deed. That's what's up. When I was talking to my mother on the phone, and I heard, it was surreal because I heard her listening to the news. Okay. And in the news, it says rapper Nipsey Hussle is, and I'm hearing like it's a movie. And I'm like saying to her, what did they just say? And she's saying, they said such and such. And I'm like, nah, this is Sunday. I'm like, nah, that don't sound right. So immediately I go to look it up. And I'm trying to explain to my mother, but because I'm not so versed on the person, I'm just remembering this slight interface with what they have been doing. I'm trying to explain to her, like, no, 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 this is not just a regular passing. But she wasn't really understanding me, so I took to research, and I was quiet for many days just listening back to things that they have said, because it was a level of shock, but it wasn't, I didn't necessarily go into denial, but other people go into denial, where this is where conspiracy theory lives at. Now, I'm not saying that some conspiracy theories do not have validity, but if we're going to talk about conspiracy theory, then we're going to have to back up from the picture to a certain degree and look at the broader context. But this is just a message of me sharing from my heart to those who may be aware of the situation and may be looking for a bit more of what is currently out there, which is this kind of blow by blow desensitization of what we're actually feeling. You see what I'm saying? This is why when a trauma happens at a school or a place, they send out grief counseling, right? There's no grief counseling. There's all this madness that I see going on, which brings tears to my eyes, like, for real. Because it happens and it keeps happening and it keeps happening. And then we just have our brothers and sisters as names on the wall and not really even processing all of what we're feeling, which in turn affects our life, our subconscious, and all that. So shock and denial is one pain. Pain and guilt is another phase of grief. Some people who are closer to the person who has lost their life, like I saw the bodyguard speaking out, saying he should have been there. You have people, he's saying in his Instagram, again, and I don't like the sensationalization of people's pain, man. That stuff is whack, brethren. That, you know, do that, man. But anyway, the bodyguard is saying that he would have wanted to take it to take his place. This is those who are closer to him. This is the guilt. This is the pain of not being able of what you saw this person as, and not being able to, and thinking that their life is worth more than yours. Because for the bodyguard to say that he would have done that, he would have switched places, is to say that your message and your light and what you had to bring to the world exceeds the individual's light. And so they would have sacrificed themselves so that the world could have. We have to look at all of these thought processes as we have these type of conversations, and really hear what we're saying and what it means and how it translates in our communities. Anger and bargaining. You hear many people's words. And the other thing is that you hear celebrities' words being valued more to a certain degree, not in all spaces, but in some, than the everyday person's. That's to say that one person's hurt and pain is worth more than another person's hurt and pain. You see what I'm saying? So the celebrity, what the celebrities are saying about it, versus the people, you have some who are actually giving the voice to the community, those who knew him, those who were his childhood friends, those who were around, and say, listen, I know this person, like I sat and ate with this person, and their pain is also very real. So some of them have anger, I heard, and some of them, again, are bargaining, like what you see with the bodyguard, who's saying, you know, and other people who are saying like they would switch places, and only if this. Bargaining sounds like, man, if you didn't go there that day, and what if this would have happened, and what if you would have taken a different route, or what if you would have let people know where you were going, or what if you did give that person. This is kind of what we do when we try to make sense of that feeling that we're having, right? This very human experience that has now transcended the human experience, because now we're trying to understand the unseen. We're trying to understand the spiritual realm and make sense of it. So you have people who are right now in shock and denial, and everybody doesn't necessarily hit the same points at the same time. And so part of the issue is when we don't understand that it's called the phases of grieving and this mourning process. In some cultures, you mourn for 30 days. In some cultures, the wife of the slain or the person who's lost is expected to mourn for a year or 2 years. It's called a mourning period, where you have a plethora of feelings and emotions that pass through you. that you allow passage to pass through you. But I'm looking out at this landscape and saying, boy, we lost that as a people, as a society. It's sensationalized. It's flashed all over the news. The footage of this person's death and other person's death, like Mike Brown being laid in the street and Sandra Bland, the footage is being played like it's Netflix videos. I'm sorry, I'm gonna calm down because depression, reflection, and loneliness is also a part of the grieving process. For those who are close, they gave statements from, and this is for not just this situation. I'm using this situation as an entry point into the conversation of somebody may still be mourning the loss of whomever they lost over the years or last year or last month, right? And if we don't have grief counseling, if we don't have information to say that what you're feeling is okay, when grief becomes an issue is when we go way beyond and we never let go, or we never keep going, or we never learn, or we never take the things that the person meant to us and internalize it and then go forward in life. And this is when grief now becomes maladaptive. But grieving is a process. And if we don't allow ourselves or allow our loved ones to grieve, we are robbing them of their humanity. Even animals grieve, right? I'm talking because I understand about grief, because I have lost. You understand what I'm saying? One of my, anyway, I'm not going into all of that, but let me keep going. The upward turn. There's some people who want to jump right back on track right now. Oh man, I'm so sorry to hear what happened to you, man. That's really messed up. Yeah, but listen to my mixtape now. But yeah, listen to what's going on. Like that in some spaces is like, yo, that's classless, dude. That's distasteful. You know what I'm saying? That people taking like that moment of silence, like, you know how something may happen and somebody's like, oh, let's give a moment of silence. 2 seconds later, boom, they're back to whatever they're doing. That's the disconnect from, this is kind of how we're taking it. Radio blackout, 2 seconds, boom. But then you have other people after the cameras are gone, after the lights is turned off, after the hoopla is done. Yes, we have to get on with life because many people are in survival mode. But at the same time, it's important to be mindful. I guess that's the word I'm looking for, to be mindful of the humanity of others, man. I want to talk about other things. This is the first one I want to talk about. And then I'm going to come back at another time and talk about other things that we would be remiss if we didn't talk about. But right now, I want to talk about mourning, and this is what I'm talking about. Reconstruction and working through it. These are all phases of grief where you have come to terms, the shock and denial has passed, the pain and guilt. Some people live with the pain and guilt for their entire life. If something happens, some people never get over that pain and guilt, and it actually robs them of their life. Some people never get over the anger. Some people never get beyond the depression. We have to keep in mind those people in our lives, in and around us, and understand that words have creative power. Our words have creative power. And I think in a world of social media where everybody just have that one mic that Nas was speaking about, we are reckless with our words. Reconstruction and working through, and then acceptance and hope, which is that getting beyond the loss and accepting it for what it is and learning from what has just happened, and then the hope. I saw and heard one of his business partners, and I was taking notes, the manager for the Marathon store saying that because the stance that Nipsey took in life was to keep pushing that this is a marathon and not to stop, that he would want people to continue to keep hope and take what he was trying to do and has done in his community and continue to push forward. And so I saw today on the news that across the street from the complex, there are some teenagers looking to do a community garden. And so we see that in the case also of Tupac's mother, where she did an estate for him, and they had an estate, and then they had where they were reaching out to young children. And then she had a farm, if I'm not mistaken. And so you see a lot of people start foundations. You see a lot of people do things in memory of someone, because let's get to a little bit about life, because we're talking about mourning and what's the value of mourning if we don't understand the value of life, right? So this is Soul Anonymous. I want to thank everybody for joining us. This is really my lane. However, it can be a bummer for some people sometimes, and we have to kind of bring all in all of the pieces. And history is a very important piece to healing, right? History is a very important piece to healing. So the purpose of life, according to what I learned of what from his own words, from his interviews, is that there was a point where he may not have understood the purpose of life. According to what he's saying, and many people are saying, he's of Eritrean background, which is, if you know the history of Eritrea and Ethiopia, they were kind of one people. There was a bit of a war. So Eritrea is that little country that kind of broke off for Ethiopia. And then you have Ethiopia. But I believe it was last year, after however many years of this type of familiar war, there was this amending of this bad relationship. So I find it interesting that his father, according to what is being said, fled from Eritrea, which was at war. You have to look at, when you look at someone's purpose, you have to look at the environment by which they were created and conceived. What was the thought processes in the mind of the father? What seed was planted? Because the thought processes in the mind of the father and the seed and the ground, proverbially, which is the mother or the environment or the womb in which this person is nurtured, and their name all ties into their destiny and their movements. And so sometimes we unknowingly are not as purposeful with our procreation and with our naming process and with our rearing process. Along this way, you don't necessarily get it perfect, because you can do everything right, but along this way are like all of the pots, I mean the elements that go into this pot, which makes up this soul. Okay, so if his father is fleeing from a place of intertribal war, and according to what I hear, comes to America around 19 or 20, he gets with he said his mother was from, so you can see I've been doing my research. His mother is from Louisiana. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to put it in the box. And so he marries in, or doesn't marry, he procreates this father who's coming from this place of strife and contention and not being safe, comes to another place that is similar, right? Comes to another place that is similar, which is this Compton area that may not be Eritrea and Ethiopia, but then has the same context of Eritrea and Ethiopia, which is this war gang context of one against the other. Look at what the son later on comes to do. The father fled from it. And so when people look at, for whatever reasons, like many people do, not wanting to survive, the son comes along and says, I am in a similar space, but I'm not going to flee. I'm going to survive, and I'm going to revolutionize my environment. So in the beginning, not having context, as he said, not being connected, but it's in your subconscious, it's in your DNA. This is why it's important to understand spirituality, metaphysics, and things of this nature. It's in his DNA. It's in his epigenetics that I'm not going to move from this space. I'm going to revolutionize this space. And so, according to him, he's grown, he's nurtured in this womb of associating with one side of the discussion, which is what becomes his then affiliation. Okay. According to the narrative, something changes. It's a survival mechanism. There's a friend who says this was later on, I guess 16 or 17, decides that he's going to become affiliated, not necessarily possibly wanting to, but coming to terms with this is what is the going rate, this is what is happening. But in the back of your mind, knowing I want to do better, I want to go beyond, there's more, because that is in the core of the individual. I don't know where the more is coming from, but I know there is more. According to him, he started to want to hustle for himself at the age of 14. This is going back and looking at the life of the person. And I don't just say this, that we should just do this for celebrities. In order to value life, you have to understand to a certain degree what that life has gone through, and valuing your life and the process and the struggle that the individual endured to come to this point. So, and I said this earlier this morning in one of my conversations, but Tupac said a line that, I was given this world, I didn't make it, right? And so many people are given the world, but then still not able to make sense of it. This individual was able to find purpose to say, you know what, I want more. And so according to him, the reason why he started hustling is because one year he didn't get sufficient amount of money. So this is talking about poverty. Okay. It's talking about poverty stricken areas. It's talking about the fallout from this economic disparity. It's talking about what is accessible in communities. It's talking about violence in communities because of lack. This is the environment. This is the womb by which many people are then lauded to say you came out, you were able to overcome these circumstances that we, the people, didn't necessarily put into place and continue to cause to be into place. But I will fast forward. So according to what I'm hearing him say, he didn't necessarily grow up with his father. However, when he gets of 18, he goes to Ethiopia, or Eritrea, not Ethiopia. He goes to, which by extension is Ethiopia, but he goes to Eritrea and sees and becomes culture shock, number one. But then because he's not so far removed from his roots, he's able to, after that initial culture shock, he's able to absorb the differences and be able to compare and contrast. Now, we have on record, and I say I'm going into some things on record, some things that he was saying before this kind of epiphany, before this moment. It's kind of like this Malcolm X narrative of before you get to this moment, you are in this mindset. The thing about the male, and I'm gonna have to get a little biblical on you guys for a minute, and it's spiritual, but not religious in that sense. The thing about the male, that the man, the melanated man, the male in general, melanated man specifically, has to understand is that your mouth, all of our mouths have creative power, but the masculine's mouth, the Hebrew for male is zakar. Zakar means to remember. The masculine's mouth he is often bound, not often, he is bound to his vows, to the things that he professes. So on the positive side, he was saying that I want to overcome my circumstances. He's writing it on the walls. I know that I can break through these spaces. This is on the positive side. On the negative side, the male who is supposed to remember is saying things and pronouncing things that are vying in the spiritual realm against the positive things that the person. So essentially, one thing is going this way, and the other thing that the person is saying is going this way. Has said at the foundation. So when a man makes a vow, we see a lot of times in the hood, right? There is this thought of men not really they understand what they're saying, but I think they don't understand the long-reaching implications of what you're saying when you make vows. Many people say they're making vows and they say on my, and whoever they love or whoever they cherish, whoever they value, they make that vow on that person's head. On your such and such, on your such and such. They used to say when we were little, on such and such's grave. This is a vow. That or an oath that, listen, what this person is saying is true. And so when we look at the rap culture and when we look at music in general, when we look at art, and we think that the universe is going to say, well, you're just pretending, or you're just acting, or you're just trying to make a dollar. That's not how it works in the spiritual realm. That's not how I understand it to work in the spiritual realm. But this is what society has tricked us to believe, that the things we're saying is just for art and just for entertainment. I want to talk about that in another video, but I just wanted to preface what I wanted to talk about by saying that we have to be more responsible and accountable with the things that we're saying and what we are accepting as art form. Words have creative power. And this is why it says, if you're angry, don't speak. Not yet. Because when you speak things out of anger, many times you want to pull those things back, and you hear stuff like, yo, I wish I never said that. And this is where self-control comes at. But I'll get back to the mourning portion for right now. Again, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to share. I'll recap. This is what we may be seeing happening in our community right now. Many people across the globe. I see Arichia is mourning because Arichia, he's reached to a certain space in which people are saying, yes, now, Grammy nominated. This is how I hear the news giving value to the person's life, by saying the value system is celebrity, and the people make the celebrity, and the Grammys are the highest achievement, which is an idol, by the way. And so this high achievement gives credence to your life. And so instead of just acknowledging you as this person and what you have been doing, they have to preface it by saying Grammy nominated. But that's another conversation for another day. Stages of grief. Shock and denial. Many people are experiencing pain and guilt. Anger and bargaining. I explained those for those who just joined us. You're going to have to listen to the replay. Depression, reflection, and loneliness. The upward turn, reconstruction, and working through acceptance and hope. And I say that different cultures have a process of grief, but this culture, the culture that we're living in, this newly formed American culture, in which everything is sensationalized, it robs people of the grieving process. It allows people to kind of be, I'm gonna just have to be real. There's nothing else I can be but real, right? It is, there's a word they call a jankro, right? Don't open the door, which is a vulture. When the vulture sees, or the jankro sees something that is dead, that jankro or vulture uses that thing that was living as food. So we hear people talking about culture vulture, about the culture of vulture. In order to be a culture vulture, one is saying that the culture is dead, because vultures don't feed on the living. You have parasites who feed on the living, but vultures feed on the dead. And when you have people that are just putting people who has passed, and not really adding value to the discussion. And like I said, I debated as to whether even to put his name in this title, because there's too much of that going on, and it's not even add, it's to not even add value to the discussion. It is to say, I just want to say something about it. So prayerfully, prayerfully, this is helpful. If whomever you are mourning, if you're mourning, unfortunately, your child, if you are mourning, unfortunately, the loss of a parent, the loss of sisters, the loss of brothers, the loss of cousins, the loss, if you're mourning the loss of anyone, and sometimes you can mourn the loss of someone who is not necessarily physically dead, but no longer within your reach, and you have no communication with that, and people mourn those as well. And so if we want to bring back humanity within our culture, and I'm going to come to Pascal's question, if we want to bring back make the heart no longer stony, we have to bring back humanity. And I'm going to come back and talk a little bit about turning from our wickedness and to do that which is right, and how it looks versus being in wickedness and staying in wickedness. And wickedness, for those who are hearing the word and be like, wickedness, sin is essentially missing the mark of, and then one would have to ask, what is the mark? So I am having a hard time understanding what Black people mean by love, is Pascal. And sister, do you think Black on Black crime should be considered hate crime? It is hate. It is hate. When I heard what they're calling his business partner, the general manager of the store, Cowboy, I think I wrote his name down, Herman Douglas. And I want to come back and talk about jealousy, envy, and hatred. I think I did a video about that a couple of, or toxic YouTubers. I did some videos like that a couple of months ago. But this is what he says. And we'll go into more what if he says concerning why he think it happened. Because he was there. He said he was there. He turned around. He walked back into the store. And less than 3 seconds later, it happened. So he's saying that he saw everything that happened. And as soon as he turned his back, the guy came back, as we saw in the video, and took his life and shot other people who was there as well. It is, there's hate, there's internalized hate. It's hate based on status. It's hate based on progress. It's hate based on, I guess I'll bring that back to looking at the person that we're talking about, by saying that many people are lauding his accomplishments because they within themselves did not, were not, and have not been able to push necessarily beyond this barrier. And make no mistake about it, it is a barrier. It is an intentional barrier. It is an intentional suppression. There are many people who have entrepreneurial ambitions and who want to be that teacher, who want to be the leader, who want to be all of these things, but there's so many hurdles and obstacles. And so rightfully he names the store and the movement that the marathon. And here's another thing I will drop, and then I'm gonna wrap it up, is that one of the best known long distance runners, or countries that are best known, let me say that, for long distance running in the world, when you look at the Olympics, are Ethiopians. So it is, I don't know if it was intentionally, subconsciously, or whatever for his family. And let's not forget that he has a brother, an older brother, Sam, if I'm not mistaken, and father and mother and granny and sister and children and significant other who are mourning a real loss, not just the loss of somebody who inspired them, but of their flesh and blood. He names the store, or they name it, the marathon, which is, like I said, marathon runners, bar none, come out of Ethiopia. And when I went to Ethiopia, I understood why. The build, and he also had the build. His brother has the build. The build is number one, the physical build. Number two, the terrain in Ethiopia. The terrain in Ethiopia is crazy. Not the lowlands, like the highlands, where all of the Starbucks, you know what I'm saying, prime Ethiopian coffee comes from. The highlands is so high that the lung capacity, because I experienced it, that your lungs have to expand to a certain degree, and you can take in more oxygen. You can take in more oxygen to run greater distances. So when I'm talking about you going up, and I would see people getting it in the morning time, and running and going uphill, and them hills were crazy. So this thought of marathon is also within the context of the spaces that his father came from, and by extension, his roots are planted, to understand that it doesn't just stop here. It's a long distance run. I guess your culture is far from being dead. In reality, all rise of clarity and willpower will have very good results. Yeah, the culture is not dead, but I was addressing this thought process of culture vulture, and that if you're going to take an analogy of a vulture and put it in today's space and context, then if one is saying that somebody is a vulture of a culture, then one has to also say that vultures do not feed on life, vultures feed on death. So by extension, by disparaging what somebody is doing, by misappropriating your culture, you're also saying by extension your culture is dead. Words have creative power is what I'm saying to that. So hopefully I clarify that. Concerning money, yes, the building of the community. Concerning money, we don't leave here, back to the spirituality and the solonomics of the thing, we don't leave here with anything but our soul. You don't even leave here with your body. Okay? You don't leave here with your breath. This is why this channel and my life journey is called Solonomics, so that I can understand for myself, extend to my immediate family, and then to the larger community, something that I think oftentimes we have lost touch with. And you give me 1 second. Sorry about that. Here's the thing. It's not all, it cannot be about money only. Making this about money robs us, because at the end of the day, none of it goes in, none of it goes out. I also found it interesting that they named part of the record label, if I'm not mistaken, All Money In, No Money Out. You don't leave here with it. I don't care if they put it in your pocket at the funeral, if they put the gold chain in the thing. I don't care what they put in the casket. We see many cultures putting all these things. You know what happened? Years later, grave robbers come and take all material things. You do not leave here with material things. So if your entire life is encompassed by the want and the acquisition of material things, you have missed the purpose of why we manifest in this flesh. We have an opportunity, and this particular individual, he began to understand that it was more than about money. But I don't, just by looking at it, he didn't reach his maturation where some of the things that he adhered to earlier on, which is the foundation, the seed of something, that he had the time to demanifest is what it does look like to me, observing, is paying a level of restitution to the very community, even though he was given this space and was at one point absorbed in this space. But when he became awakened, then he began to pay restitution back to this space, meaning the people that you possibly hurt along the way, the things that you've done, and you know within your soul and your consciousness that you've done, there's a level of restitution that you have to pay in life to kind of make it right. There's a portion in the not in the Proverbs, in the prophets, that say, if a man turns from his wickedness and then does that which is right, it shall be counted unto him as righteousness. So if you're going in the wrong direction for a certain period of time, and you were like, oh, chill, I'm going in the wrong direction, and you turn around, which is what repentance means. But a lot of people, they churchify a lot of these thought processes. Repentance simply means to turn around. Shub, which is the word for, or tashub, which is the word for repentance, it means to turn around and go back the other way. It's like you're driving down the road and you're like, oh man, I think I'm lost. And you stop at the 7-Eleven, or you stop at the person on the corner, and you be like, yo, where's King Street? And he was like, nah, dude, you're in the wrong direction. King Street is on the other side of town. And you turn around. That is the physical analogy for what it means to repent spiritually. And I think, to me, why it hit me the degree that it does, that even though just by hearing the things that he was continuously saying, it doesn't sound like he fully turned around, but he was on his way to turning around and showing people how to turn their life around. And when something such as that nature happens and you're seeing the potential, you mourn the loss of the soul and you mourn the loss of the fulfillment of that soul, the purpose of that soul. And we all have purpose. Why are we incarnated in the flesh? Why are we here? And celebrity gossip, I have to say this, fighting and contention, envy, jealousy, and animosity is not why you're here. People are making a living and priding themselves on making a living of digging their own ditch because you're going to eat the fruits of your mouth. We're seeing something of this nature happening right now, and I'm not banging on people. I'm trying to allow us, if we can, to call attention to being led astray because we think it's about chasing the bag. Hold on one second. I'm going to come back. Just hold on one second. I got it. All right. Sorry about that. Yeah. So we think this is about chasing the bag. We see something of this happening now with the conversation of what's happening around this Wendy Williams conversation. Now, I know people got to do what they have to do, or right, but we have to take into consideration that there's a saying that if you're going to dig one pit, dig two. That means that everything that you're doing, that you plan, that you make a living on, doing to other people, the law of the universe says that these things that we create is cyclical. But because for many people it's entertaining, and because for many people we're not thinking and we're not learning to govern our spirit and we're not learning to purify our vessel, we go into spaces and we gravitate to spaces that make us think that it's okay to do what we're doing. But at the end of the day, you don't leave here with them. And none of this stuff matters at that point. The body stays. The breath goes back to the creator, and the soul is brought into account. So back to what I'm saying, when a soul is traumatically expelled from their body, that soul kind of gravitates around this space in this area. The more you call the soul, is the more the soul kind of doesn't have an opportunity to eventually find their way to rest. I'm wondering, how do you know all this stuff? And what are you talking about? I watch a lot of and study and speak to people who have had near-death experiences. My father being one of them. Okay. Near-death experience is where people don't die, but their soul is forcibly ejected from their body because the body undergoes some level of trauma for whatever reason, and the body is the soul is expelled, but the soul is still, traveling, but the soul is still close to the body. In which case, the soul can hear everything you're saying. The soul can hear you. So you'll have some people. I speak to my father, and he had a bad accident at work like 14 so years ago, over a decade ago, in which he was in a coma for 3 days, but was able to tell you who came, who left, when they came to. Because here it is, the body is your vehicle. Okay, the body is your vehicle. The soul is you. The soul is the I. The soul is the me. Right? The body is the vehicle that allows your soul movement and expression. When you see Amuna doing all of this, that is the internal programming, the fieriness, that is the internal programming dictating how I move. So when you see one person and you be like, oh man, that's such an old soul, or that's such a calm soul. We say those things. We don't say that's a calm body. You know what I'm saying? That's a, you know, we say that's an old soul, that's a calm soul, that's a loving soul. These are the ways in which we express people. But many of us, so when we have a soul, let's get to when we have a soul that when I look into his eyes, when I look back, it's like why I did the R. Kelly study. Because I'm not necessarily looking at drama and this and that. I'm looking into the eyes, because the eyes is the window to the soul, right? And the heart, the mouth professes what's in the heart. You understand what I'm saying? Not the physical heart, but what the basically is professing what is in it, what's within you. And when I look into his eyes, and when I look at his movements and the way he moves, I see something different than what I'm hearing other people are seeing. I'm seeing a heaviness when I look at him, when I look at his interviews, and when I'm hearing his speaking. I'm seeing a heaviness, but yet still at the same time a feeling of responsibility. Someone who is compelled to do what they're doing. But at the same time, there's a heaviness on the person. I say all that to say, I'm not going to go much longer. I'll come back again and talk about jealousy, envy, and covetousness, some of the reasons that people are saying that his life was taken, and also the conversation about what rap represents. More so rap, which is, to me, as I was thinking about it, the storyteller, which is what the rapper is the griot, right? He is the entertainer that is coming from antiquity, the person who has a superb memory, the person who is able to narrate the stories in and around you, what's happening, and put them on record so that they can be passed down. Now you put them on physical record, but in antiquity, the record was the mind of the adherents. You're so much welcome, Sang. Thank you for joining us. The record was the mind of the people. So the griot, when you see in ancient cultures or past cultures, they would sit around fires, or they would sit around places, and the storyteller would either tell the story to a rhythm, a rhythmic retelling. And then you have people who are wanting to be, that wasn't a space where there were many people in the same village, like you got 50 storytellers. But at the same time, we're taking the people's gravitation to one storyteller or another based on how much we like the personality of the storyteller. And I'll leave it at that for now, because according to what the narrative is, one storyteller or would-be storyteller or desired storyteller comes to another storyteller to say, give me your platform or help me to tell my story. It's like going to shopping your manuscript to an editor, to a book company, and everyone is slamming the door in your face saying, not that your story doesn't have value, or someplace your story doesn't have value, this is what they're saying, but I don't want to be the one to tell it. It's like a movie script. It's the same thing. And that level of rejection and disappointment, we have to also consider when we're talking about this particular situation of envy, jealousy, and covetousness. I just put the covetousness in there, animosity, and self-hatred. So with that said, I hope I helped someone somewhere. Understand, look up these phases of grief. Understand that it is a process. Understand that we have purpose. Understand if you haven't sought your purpose, that's your best, greatest thing that you can do for yourself. People are like, how do I help the community? Help yourself. In order to help your community, you have to first help yourself. And in helping yourself, you get the tools. You seek these tools. You get the information that you can transform your own life, by extension, transforming your immediate environment. And it takes you. You are the change that you are seeking for. Yes, we can inspire. Like some of the things that I heard from him are inspiring. But he had to a certain level, first be inspired. And that because inspiration comes sometimes externally. It's a spiritual thing. You may be inspired by something you see, but then there's a spiritual inspiration. And one more thing I want to say, and then I'm gonna go, because I gotta go. I gotta go make these burgers, y'all. I got some information coming for y'all in a minute concerning some. I'll let y'all know that in a minute. His name, according to the story, he said he didn't know what his name meant. I don't know if I said this already, but I'll say it now. According to what I heard him say, he didn't know what his name meant. His given name, Ermias. According to what he wrote, or according to, he said he was writing with a girl, and the girl says that if he knew what his name meant. And then she goes and looks up his name, and this is what he ends up tattooing on his face. And she looks up his name, and I don't want to misquote what she said his name meant, and that his name meant God will arise, I believe. Let me see, because I'm looking at this. He gets this thing tattooed on his face. I believe this is what he says. Next to this prolific tattoo that he has on his face, right? He gets this, what is said the meaning of his name is. I'll bring more of that. Hold on. I don't want to give you guys misinformation. This is why I'm trying to get the side view so I can see it. And I was looking at it during the interview. It's written by his eye. Okay. I'm looking up in another place. Okay, here we go. God will rise. I believe that's what it says. I'm looking up in another place for this, the name, and it says that the name means, I had a point to make with this, y'all, but now I can't. Where did I put it? I have to come back with that one then, because I think I pulled it on my other computer, and then I pulled it on my other computer, and then I'm not at the other computer, so it's not at my fingertips. So we'll come back for that one. We'll come back. Let me check and see if we have any comments or questions. If not, I'm gonna come back and talk about the comparing and contrasting of what we put out in the universe, and how we have to be very mindful of the things we say, especially if you're a male, especially if you are a male, because you have, and this is why when a male speaks, oftentimes people are willing, a female can say the same exact thing that the male says. But when the male says it, it has a different vibration. It's like your mother can say 50 times, do this thing, and she has to probably raise her voice. She has to yell and scream at you. But your father can come and say to do the same thing your mother just said, and it means something different to you because your father said it. You see what I'm saying? And so we'll talk about the males in our culture and the things that they say and the things that get them street cred and the things that are acceptable, and then how these things oftentimes manifest as tragedy in life. So with that said, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I'm glad I got through that without, you know what I'm saying? I'm glad I was able to get through that. And once again, many condolences to everyone across the globe who is mourning at this time, who has a loss at this time, who has not been able to get over their loss. Pray you that you seek counseling if you need it, a community support group if you need it, a space that you can get through this portion in life. And we'll come back and talk about much more. Like, share, like, and subscribe, and do all that other stuff. And leave your comments in the section. As long as we keep it clean and respectful, it's going to be all good. All right. One.